In what is being dubbed as the Friday Night Massacre, Donald Trump's Postmaster General Louis DeJoy has done a major shakeup at the U.S. Postal Service, and it has a lot of folks, I think, justifiably a little alarmed. And so I wanted to let's look at what exactly they've done and then talk a little bit about what the implications of a move like this are. So this is from Common Dreams. It's an article in Common Dreams on August 7th, and it's titled Friday Night Massacre at U.S. Postal Service as Postmaster General, a major Trump donor, ousts top officials. And there's a quote here that just says, America is in a dead sprint to authoritarianism. The man is pulling out all the stops to prevent the citizens of this country from holding a legitimate election in which he might face removal from office. So this here is a picture here. This is the Postmaster General and Trump, major Trump campaign donor, who then turned around and was made into the Postmaster General. His name is Louis DeJoy, Louis, Louis DeJoy. And yeah, just a shot of him. So from this article in Common Dreams, government watchdogs, Democratic lawmakers, and pro-democracy advocates declared it a Friday night massacre for the U.S. Postal Service after news broke in a classic end-of-the-week dump that Louis DeJoy, a major GOP donor to President Donald Trump and the recently appointed Postmaster General, had issued a sweeping overhaul of the agency, including the ouster of top executives from key posts and the reshuffling of more than 24 other officials and operational managers. According to the Washington Post, the shakeup came as congressional Democrats called for an investigation of DeJoy and the cost-cutting measures that have slowed mail delivery and ensnared ballots in recent primary elections. 23 postal executives were reassigned or displaced, the new organizational chart shows. Analysts say the structure centralizes power around DeJoy, a former logistics executive and major ally of President Trump, and de-emphasizes decades of institutional postal knowledge. All told, 33 staffers included in the old postal hierarchy either kept their jobs or were reassigned in the restructuring, with 5 more staffers joining the leadership from other roles. So already under fire for recent policy changes at the USPS that mail carriers from within and outside critics have denounced as a sabotage effort to undermine the Postal Service broadly, as well as disrupt efforts to carry out mail-in voting for November's election amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The moves unveiled late Friday night were viewed as an overt assault on democracy and a calculated opportunity to boost Republicans' long-held dream of undercutting or privatizing the government-run mail service, while also boosting their election prospects in the process. So I think that this did a perfect job of really just summing up what this really amounts to. So I don't know how familiar folks are with the U.S. Postal Service, but it is one of the most efficient institutions of our government. They operate without any reliance on taxpayer funding. This is a government institution, a public institution that delivers mail to the most remote places in the country. It guarantees that every person, every citizen of this country has access to the communication tool of the Postal Service. So it allows any person in this country to have a letter delivered anywhere else in the country. And so that is what the U.S. Postal Service allows, and also allows people to receive mail anywhere in the country. So even in the most rural, remote parts of the country, they still get U.S. Postal Service mail delivery. And no private, mind you, there's nothing blocking private companies from doing that. Simply put, the market solution did not solve it. Markets do not solve the problem because it's simply not profitable. In fact, Amazon and I believe other package delivery services, but for sure, Amazon has a deal with the United States Postal Service. I believe they still do. I know that there's been some political turmoil around this, but they had a deal with Amazon where they did the sort of the last mile delivery service where you would, Amazon could only get it so far, their packages, and the USPS would come in and do the final, the last mile of that journey, because no private company wanted to make that leg of the journey because it's simply not profitable. The only way that it works is by us as a public in a community coming together and sharing in that responsibility through this system of stamp purchases, which is one of just amazingly efficient, that they fund the entire postal service off of stamps and the funding from stamps and the small services that the postal service does, right? Like postal services can do like money orders and things like that, and they can take small fees from that, right? There's actually a really amazing, and this just shows you the difference between a real left-wing approach to the U.S. Postal Service versus the right-wing approach. Bernie Sanders had proposed, I believe, along with one of the Justice Democrats, I believe it was either AOC or Ilhan Omar. Sorry for not giving them credit here properly, but I believe Bernie Sanders and one other Justice Democrat, I think it was Ilhan Omar, correct me if I'm wrong, if anyone knows or is familiar, proposed could be Rashida Tlaib as well. She's also an awesome one who, this is in her, this is definitely something that she would get after as well and support. They proposed extending banking, so creating postal banking and a postal banking system whereby all post offices would be able to operate as small local banks that were allowed to make small banking transactions for people and check cashing, things of that sort or whatever. And it does this without they can even be they're a non-predatory bank that would exist, a public banking system that it would immediately provide, banking services and make banking services available to poor and low income people, as well as, just anyone that needed those services. But it would definitely open it up and would disproportionately positively impact lower income people who are often preyed upon by things like payday lenders and things of that sort. So this would offset that and would provide some protection there. And then also would be a way to help fund the post office. Now, the reason that the post office is even in danger, is in any kind of financial danger, is not because it's inefficient, and it's not why they're, because there have been, and I may have some articles up, I'll see. I don't think that we have any additional, but the Postal Service has been under attack, and it's been under attack for a long time now. And one of the biggest measures that they've managed to put in place that has damaged the post office is that they've required the post office, and it's the only institution, no private or public institution is required to do this. They require the post office to fully fund their employee pensions 70 years in advance. So they're the only institution that is required to fund employee pensions 70. As I'm reading this, I'm literally looking out my window and like a USPS truck just drove by. So kudos to them. Shout out. Wish I could go out there and give them a little elbow bump, but don't want to endanger their lives any more than they already are by having to be out on the front lines of the pandemic, So these folks, have been required to fund their employee pension 70 years in advance. I mean, that would be great if all companies had to do that and everybody had to compete against that. And that was the way that we did. Like, sure, I still think 70 years is too extreme. I mean, I just don't think that that's a reasonable thing to do. I think it's much better to just like have, government-backed security for your pension, for your retirement, and then, rely on that instead of having to rely on, a private corporation funding it out in some, in advance and such. So Mark Keever says using affordable flat rates. That's another great point about the USPS, is that they are doing this all using affordable flat rates, right, for shipping. So that's like really amazing. This is just an amazingly efficient government service, and a really good point to have in the back of your mind whenever you get into arguments with certain small government conservative or small government libertarian types, or libertarians in general, since they're almost like no government kind of folks. But like, this is a really good point to keep in sort of the back of your mind, is when they talk about, a lot of them will say how government is so inefficient. One of the best examples you can pull out for them is the U.S. Postal Service, how, a public service like that can be run based on, like Mark McKeever points out here, affordable flat rate stamps, and affordable flat rate postage. And so shout out to the USPS for doing what they do, and just know this is a long time attack on the USPS in order to, and this is a two-pronged attack from the Republicans here. And just to point out that it's two-pronged in the sense of, one, by doing these measures, and make no mistake, doing stuff like this shakeup at this thing, this weakens the effectiveness of the USPS and strengthens Louis DeJoy's ability to deal damage, because as analysts have pointed out in this, and they said that analysts have said that this move centralizes power around DeJoy. So this is giving him more power, and that is anti-democratic. I don't think anything could be more obviously anti-democratic than, consolidating power in the hands of even fewer people. And so this is totally an anti-democratic move. And this is the second prong of this is also should be concerning, because it's another anti-democratic move in that it's made to weaken the effectiveness of mail-in voting. And in particular, if I believe that if they deal damage to the idea of mail-in voting this is what they do. They first weaken the government and they make it ineffective through their own policy measures. They, right-wingers in general, but also, Democrats are also to blame here because they're so weak and ineffective at fighting and resisting against this stuff. They're so ineffective at this stuff. Rather point out and whine over, trying to get Trump suspended off of Twitter like Kamala Harris did, than to do actual, substantive, fight for substantive rights here. But what they can do by weakening public perception of mail-in voting, they can then, it will help them to further attack it. So again, it's almost, they're really, really strategic in these, and that it's almost, it's really multi-pronged in that not only do they damage the vote for this year, right? Because now you have a chance for them to harm the vote for this year. Republicans want to have lower voter turnout. There's some famous thing about some famous clip where, a Republican admitted that, their goal is to have lower voter turnout, because when there's lower voter turnout, Republicans win. And so if you're in that tribalist mindset of, I want my team to win, then the way you do that as a Republican is you get lower voter turnout, more voter suppression, right? So this is a voter suppression tactic, something that, as somebody that believes in, extending democracy everywhere, this is absolutely antithetical to everything I believe in. And I just find this to be abhorrent. It's, trying to disenfranchise people that are going to be voting in this election. They're going to do all kinds of tricks, right? If they slow down the ballots, right, then they can use the trick of saying, oh, well, this mail didn't get processed before 12 p.m. on the day of the election. Well, why didn't it? It's because there literally weren't enough people in place, maybe because they've been one of the things, and they talk about it, I think, further down in this article, is that they have been one of the things that DeJoy has done since coming into power is that he took away the ability for people, for U.S. Postal Service workers to earn overtime. They couldn't work any overtime. And so now when you're in a situation where some people are going to feel threatened and not want to be at work, and so, you're going to need to have more work, more coverage, more people needing to work overtime because more things are being sent through the mail now than ever, because, all of our communication has just had to further move, through remote standards. And so people are relying on, deliveries more, than ever before. And so people are going to need to work overtime, and DeJoy has implemented policies to prevent that from happening by preventing workers from working overtime. So, so yes, let me just pull up we have a comment here from Mark McKeever says, Mark says, I'm glad you brought up the pension of this whole fiasco, but the Democrats have turned a blind eye to reverse this. So sad. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This is what they do. The Mick resistance. It's this, they put up this fake resistance when really they also have donors in private, corporate donors, corporate backers that are fine with the U.S. Postal Service being privatized. They don't care about the marginalized people and the folks in rural communities that will be disproportionately negatively impacted by losing something like a universal system of, communication, essentially. And this has also the effect of people not getting medicines on time because this slows the service down of the U.S. Postal Service. So they're trying to purposefully deal damage to it and then turn around and say, oh, look at that. It's so weak. You need to go and let private companies take over because look at the public service. It didn't work out. It was ineffective. It was inefficient, when really what made it ineffective and inefficient was all the messed up policy provisions that they've put in place to weaken it and to damage it. And this is one of the reasons that Richard Wolff says we cannot leave capitalists in place, because as soon as we put up any kind of helpful legislation to help working class people, they immediately get to work. The capitalists immediately get to work and start to figure out how they can slowly chip away at that legislation to damage it, to attack it, until they weaken it, until they can destroy it. And they do it with unions, and they do it with things like, privatizing, the postal service or any other public services they want to privatize. They'd like to privatize the military with things like these, private mercenary outfits that they hire, like who were those people, like BlackRock, I believe they're called, or Blackstone, BlackRock. I'm mixing up like the freaking ones from Born Identity right now with the actual people. I forget who they are. They're like BlackRock, and one of them is like an investment firm that I'm totally mixing in here. But there's like Blackstone or whoever the hell it is that Betsy DeVos's younger brother, Eric Prince, whoever he worked for, he was a, one of these like private mercenary types, and he was in Afghanistan and Iraq doing all kinds of effed up stuff. So they love to do this. They want to privatize. And so they can, and this is how they do it. So they weaken it. They damage the vote this year. Of course, they mess up the vote this year, and that can impact, down ballot people, smaller elections. And so smaller elections. And so that has an impact, not just in the presidential race, but all across the board in smaller races around the country. And so this is their goal. And their goal is to deal the damage there, but then also they can then turn around and say, look at that, mail-in voting is the problem. We can't trust the mail-in vote. You saw Trump trying to turn this into like saying that the mail-in vote is somehow like inherently the mail-in vote is like fraudulent. He was saying like the mail-in vote's fraud, even though this dude he voted in the 2020 election via absentee ballot, which is a mail-in vote. And he tries to, draw some BS distinction between mail-in and absentee balloting. Sure, there's a difference, and very slight difference. They're both voting done by mail, period. Stop. Any kind of fake distinction they try to draw beyond that is garbage. It's a minute distinction after that, and it's an insignificant distinction after that. So that's what this is all about. This is an attempt to privatize the U.S. Postal Service and weaken the U.S. Postal Service. Weaken the potential for mail-in balloting as well, which is a right that should in the state of Oregon, they have 100% mail-in ballots, and like they have like the highest rate of participation in their democracy in the whole country. Like, so when you provide people with mail-in ballots and you make it easier for people to vote, more people vote. So I believe more mail-in ballots. It should be mail-in ballots, ranked choice voting. Like, I want all of those policies implemented so that we can expand our democracy. We need ranked choice, mail-in ballots. That's how they do it in, like, right now in San Francisco. It's like mail-in, ranked choice. You get your ballot, you can like sit down with it for like weeks. You can do all your research. You can fill it out slowly, talk to whoever you want to talk to while you fill it out. You know, like you get all your information, you become a well-informed citizen, and then you cast your vote, then you mail it in. And it's totally legitimate. And we can absolutely, and it allows people that are, you know, disenfranchised people through reasons of like disabilities, having trouble even leaving their home, or compromised people that can't really go out in public in those settings, like an election hall where there's so many people crossing in there. They just, if you're immunocompromised, often you cannot go into public spaces like that. So it prevents people from being able to participate in democracy. So I absolutely believe that mail-in balloting should be a universal, you know, right to everyone. And so that we don't do it is a travesty in this country. So this is something that, I mean, during a pandemic, it's absolutely like, it's absurd that we wouldn't do it. You absolutely have to do it in the middle of a pandemic, but it's something that should exist all the time for everyone. It should be an option for everyone all the time, anywhere you are in the country. Thanks for watching Radical Democracy Podcast. I'm your host, Kamali Rose. Please like and share this video, subscribe to the channel, and if it doesn't bother you, hit that bell below to receive notifications whenever we go live or launch a new video. Please leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you can afford it, do me a huge favor and head over to my Patreon at patreon.com/radicaldemocracy and throw me a few bucks. Whatever you can afford, it goes a long way and I will greatly appreciate it. It helps the channel to continue to exist and to grow. And I really appreciate the support. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you soon. All right. Peace. All right, that was a good one. That one's it.